Thank you, Dana. As Dana mentioned, Benjamin Krill, I've been with Choice Solutions here for about 3 years, and I head up the Nutanix practice. Having previously worked at Nutanix, I have loved the technology because it's something that both meets you where you have needs now and sets you up for the future. And those are some of the things that Dennis is going to be talking about today. Talking about how we can solve some current challenges, but also getting you set up for the future and where technology is moving towards. And Nutanix is already planning for that and providing solutions. So appreciate Dennis and having his time here today. And I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Krill. I appreciate that. Hi, everybody. My name is Dennis Arnold. I'm a solution architect with Nutanix. And my focus primarily is working with Choice. And so I got to make sure that Krill doesn't get on meetings and tell lies about stuff and make sure that Choice engineers know what they're doing and make me look good. So that's always my goal is having Choice make me look good. But today we're going to talk about a variety of things. I've done a number of these presentations for Choice, and it's always fun. They always let me get up here and talk to their customers and tell jokes and things like that. I might have a couple queued up in here in the notes somewhere. If as long as they're appropriate, I might have a little bit of fun as we go through here. But I want to talk to you about a number of things. We're going to talk a little bit about web scale. We're going to talk about Nutanix because I live in a Nutanix echo chamber where I think everybody knows what Nutanix is and what we do, and that's not always the case. So I'll kind of start with that, a little bit of overview on Nutanix and kind of what we do, where we came from, that sort of thing. I'll talk about our old friend Broadcom a little bit. I'll talk about some of the breakup concerns that you might have with Broadcom. We've been in a relationship with them and as it relates to VMware for a long time, and a lot of us want to kind of cut ties. And so maybe I'll address a few of those concerns, and I'll talk about some of our new friends. Right. I'll talk about containers, Kubernetes, and AI. And then we'll do a little bit of call to action, right? So we're gonna use a football theme here. We want to make sure that you're calling the right plays as you kind of go through this journey, and then introduce some newer technologies so that we'll get you ready for the future, those future workload demands. Okay, but the first thing I want to talk about is web scale. What is web scale, right? Web scale is a concept that was originally introduced by companies like Google and Facebook. They needed infrastructure that could support their business. That included things like rapid application development, scale on demand, cost containment. And many of these web scale companies that we know today as Azure, Amazon, Facebook, Google, they tried that model of using three-tier infrastructure and it just didn't work, right? So they developed an alternative approach to IT that leveraged commodity server hardware that was all pulled together using software. The software and the system itself was distributed across all of the nodes or all of the servers that they used. And so you didn't have a bunch of servers with specialized purposes, right? Parallel operations were very important as it related to storage functions. They leveraged deduplication, metadata management, system cleanup. All of these things leveraged a lot of automation. And then compute and storage, as you could see, set very close together. Data should not have to go back and forth between storage and compute over a network. And that was the belief here. And because that created system bottlenecks and system slowdowns. And so they needed what I refer to as locationality or localization. Actually, locationality is just a word that I just made up, such as I do once in a while. But again, a lot of automation, right? Eliminating the need for expensive and error-prone manual operations. But Why is this important? Well, this is important because back in the day, you did not have this, right? This was not commercially available. This was under the ownership of the companies that you see listed there before, who had millions and billions of dollars to spend on development. So they created their own infrastructure in this way. But the rest of us had this thing that you see over on the left, right? You had this thing that you built out with multiple vendors, separate storage, separate networking, separate virtualization. It took weeks, months, years to design and deploy. It was very time consuming. There were a lot of management consoles, and every piece of this stack had a specialist team that was required to manage it. And that made it tough to acquire talent, to maintain talent. But what Nutanix did was we took that web scale model and we brought it on-prem, right? So over on the right, you see infrastructure that can be built out and available in an hour or so, right? And that's an important concept because Nutanix brings to the market this amazing thing called time to value, right? And it's the time that it takes to receive infrastructure and start using it. Okay. Particularly for on-prem. Not only that, but you can start small, you can scale. Scaling is 100% linear. It's a very nice model, and it supports all of the apps and workloads that you need to run your business. So the way we see the world is that, well, it's not so much the way we see the world, but what we want to bring to everyone is to make things easy. We think that infrastructure is something that supports your workloads and the services you provide. It shouldn't take most of your time to deliver, to keep up to date, to back it up, to secure it, and to generally make it available, right? So a lot of time to value comes into this. One of the ways we do this is providing a single operating model across multiple platforms. That means that you use the same interface and the same way of doing things, regardless of where you deploy applications and data. And so we get away from that model of siloed infrastructure in those various locations. Okay. And we want workloads to be able to ship from one location to another in an active way. We want to make sure that licenses are able to be pooled and moved wherever infrastructure needs to be because it's not always in the same place, especially with modern workloads. When we start looking at modern workloads, we realize that portability is very important to that overall story that allows us to support these modern workloads. And again, simplicity and value and a mechanism that's easy to deploy. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, because everybody knows what Broadcom did, right? They bought VMware, and I like to say that maybe I shouldn't say it while we're being recorded, but there's this one software company that bought this other software company, and the one software company was very liked, and the other software company wasn't that liked all that much. Anyway, it's just one software company right now. And we've seen all of these things happen, right? A lot of partner program changes, a lot of customer concerns. There were concerns based on previous acquisitions by Broadcom. A lot of people didn't like that very much. Support always is a concern. Will support be difficult or will support be easy? Will it get better or will it get worse? And then migration challenges, right? A lot of people were very heavily invested in VMware, and now they're feeling like maybe they want to move, right? They want to break up with the partner that they had for so long. Is there even a migration path, or am I stuck, right? Am I like a squatter on this infrastructure that doesn't want me anymore? So faced with those various challenges, it's no surprise that a lot of longtime VMware customers are evaluating their options. Even if you plan to stay with VMware, you still might want to position yourself in such a way that you can make a move when it's time to make a move, right? Get your bug out bag packed over here and get a plan going. Okay. But why would you think about using Nutanix, right? Obviously, I'm biased as it relates to Nutanix, but not without good reason. About 7.5 years ago, when I came to work at Nutanix, and by the way, I'm based in North Texas, and more specifically in Fort Worth, not in Dallas. So I always got to call that out. But I came to work at Nutanix about 7.5 years ago. I was at Citrix for about 9 years before I came to work at Nutanix. And my introduction to Nutanix was trying to compete with Nutanix. Interestingly enough, I was on the strategic alliances team and I was working with HPE to develop a solution that could go head to head with Nutanix. So I did a lot of competitive intelligence stuff on behalf of HPE. And what I discovered was that Nutanix was a really, really great solution for running Citrix workloads. And as it turned out, that was primarily where Nutanix was positioned, and that was for virtual desktop infrastructure. And there was a reason for that. A lot of those reasons revolved around speed, resiliency, data locality, shadow cloning, all of these great things that Nutanix brought to the table that VDI customers and VDI workloads could highly, highly benefit from. But it didn't stop there. It kept going and extended into various other workloads that got a lot of value from Nutanix infrastructure. So I was very intrigued by this. And so when I left Citrix, I took a straight run at Nutanix, and here I am. And I've been here for 7.5 years, and I love it. But why many customers are looking at Nutanix is because customers are potentially looking at a move away from BHV, also known as ESX. The artist formerly known as ESX, I call it BHV lovingly. It means Broadcom hypervisor. I just made that up. But customers are looking at other hypervisors, AHV being one of them. And the good thing about AHV is it's completely integrated into the Nutanix stack. That means that there's no separate interface for managing AHV. There's no vCenter equivalent, this separate thing that scales on its own. It's all just built in, right? Think about AWS as an example, or think about Azure. Maybe not so much Azure, but think about AWS. What hypervisor do they use? Who cares? It doesn't matter because you're not managing the hypervisor. It just works. It just runs, right? Well, and I'll tell you under the covers, Nutanix AHV is based on KVM. And by the way, KVM is an open source hypervisor that is used by all of the hyperscalers, basically. Okay, and has all the features that you would expect it to have, and has over 1,100 validated solutions today. So you really de-risk this migration when you move to a hypervisor such as AHV, right? A hypervisor that comes from the modern era, a hypervisor that's born in cloud and facilitates a cloud operating model. But cloud operating model doesn't mean go to public cloud. Cloud operating model means leverage public cloud or something that's public cloud like wherever you might deploy infrastructure. Okay. So things that customers care about. I talked to a lot of customers at Nutanix. We've talked to a lot of customers, and there were these sort of five-ish things that kind of bubbled to the surface when talking to customers about what their concerns are. Like, where are their concerns, right? And those concerns are pretty much universal, right? And you could leverage these concerns as you're talking to various potential replacements for companies that have hypervisors. We're not the only one with a hypervisor. We have the best one, but we're not the only one. So you got to ask them these questions, various questions like, will I lose capacity capabilities that I have today? Am I going to be a guinea pig, right? Nobody wants to be a guinea pig. What's the learning curve, right? Is it easy? Is it hard? How painful will it be to move to this new thing? Should I decide to move my workloads over there? And then finally, will my apps run on it? And then I added one here. What about support and services, right? What does that look like? So we'll get into all of these things. We'll touch on these things. So starting from the top, will I lose any capabilities I have today? I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say no because I've been talking about this for several years now, right? We kind of dig into this. We compare the Nutanix cloud platform to the VMware stack. We've been doing these comparisons for a long time. Years ago, when people would say, you don't have this feature that VMware has, my response to that was, do you need that? Do you really need that? Right now, it's more of a when they say you don't have that, I say, well, that's because our solution doesn't require that, generally speaking, right? So, and then VMware went through this whole rebundling process. The first most interesting thing is that they got rid of free ESX. So then they took their packages and they combined them all. All the good stuff went into VVF and VCF. Most customers have a requirement or two that kind of push them into VCF, the highest tier package, but not everybody needs all of it, right? And let's be honest, there's no a la carte offering from vSphere Enterprise, and customers they look at this and they go, well, I don't need all that. I just need a hypervisor, right? Well, what is just a hypervisor in VMware terms? When you look at what is included in just the hypervisor from a VMware perspective, there's a whole lot of stuff missing, a whole lot of stuff that you might want, like I don't know, HA, DRS, GPU support. None of that exists in just the hypervisor. So be careful when you say to VMware, all I need is the hypervisor, because you might be missing a lot of stuff. Now, there's a lot to digest here. And so I'm going to move on past this, but there are no more feature gaps, right? They no longer exist. And we make it easy to acquire our software. Now, I can't understate the importance of a fully integrated platform. And you don't have to memorize all of this stuff because there's no 10-question quiz at the end of this in order for you to get your cool football jersey. Or maybe we should do that. Maybe we should, maybe I'll take this, I'll get Krill to take this slide and feed it into ChatGPT and say, create 10 questions on this slide alone. And then we'll present that as part of the survey. Yeah, that's a great idea. I'm just kidding. Don't do that, Krill. But what you see here basically are apps and data happily coexisting. Harmony among the entire IT organization. No finger pointing, no network people saying that it's the Nutanix people, or no storage people saying it's the network people or the virtualization people, because they're all just the same people and they just work on the Nutanix stuff in a modern world using a modern platform, right? Getting rid of silos. That's the goal here. Um, Speaking of silos, actually, I have a small farm in Missouri that has a couple of grain silos. I don't use them that much because I haven't been growing corn lately, but I'm thinking about turning the silos into tiki huts or bars. Have you guys seen that? It's kind of cool. Anyway, moving on past that. Who else is running AHV? You don't want to be the guinea pig, right? Nobody wants to be the guinea pig, but as it turns out, there are no more guinea pigs. When I started at Nutanix 7.5 years ago, about 30% or so, 28 to 30% of our customers were running AHV. The rest of them were running ESX because you've always been able to put AOS on ESX until we developed our own hypervisor, which, by the way, we developed as a secure hypervisor by request from many of our government customers. Right. And then about 4 years ago, approximately 4 years ago, we hit that 50% mark, that inflection point, where we said, good enough has never been an option. So we decided that we would take on this idea that when only the best will do, which, by the way, was a tagline. And you guys remember the old Benson and Hedges cigarette commercials, when only the best will do? Not comparing us um, to cigarette manufacturers. But I wanted to give the tagline credit where credit was due. Today, over 80% of our 20 something or 30,000 customers are running AHV, including several Fortune 10 companies. And that's a pretty good company to be in, I think. And over time, we haven't just said, oh, well, we'll just kind of stay where we're at. This ongoing continuous development, right? Always wanting to be the best choice, the best hypervisor. You can see that in the growth of AHV. Okay. But what's the learning curve? Is it difficult? Can you learn it fast? Do I have to hire a bunch of people? Am I going to have to start negotiating salaries like the Cowboys are doing right now for a defensive end? Where are these people who know AHV? Am I going to have to pay them a fortune? But don't take it from me. AHV is easy. It's easy to learn. I'll tell you, this quick little anecdote. When I came to work at Nutanix, I learned about the management console. It's called Prism. Everything's in Prism. Everything gets managed from Prism. And I thought to myself, oh man, that sounds tough. Maybe I don't want to do that because that sounds like a disaster. The all-in-one management console. I'd seen that story before. I watched that movie. I was part of it and I didn't like it. But Prism was amazingly easy to learn. AHV was amazingly easy to learn. And so you take it from big customer JetBlue, who said it took less than a week to become comfortable with AHV. Right? That's so easy. It took me 4 weeks just to figure out my phone, and I had to have my kids help me over and over again. That's the reality. AHV is built into the platform. We make things easy. This same manager who said learning this was easy, and this is a big company, went on to say that they needed three different admins to manage their previous environment, one for storage, one for VMware, and another for networking, all working in silos, right? It's got to be easy, right? One of our customers is the Chicago Bears, right? So let me just tell you, like it's got to be easy on for the Chicago Bears to figure it out.
Easy now.
Go Bears, right? I think Ben's a Bears fan, right?
I'm
So I had a,
disgruntled.
I
I'm a realistic Bears fan. I'll tell you that much.
I had to I had to take a swipe at them. But hey, they're a Nutanix customer, so I can't be too hard on them. But how painful is it to migrate, right? Well, this starts with deciding whether or not you're going to let Choice Solutions lend a hand, because if you have no idea what you're doing, or if an idea for moving is all you've got, you could probably use a coach, a good coach, right? A coach like Nutanix. Now, when you look at a migration, a lot of times this is probably, in my opinion, in my experience, the biggest blocker to adoption. You're scared, right? It looks risky. What if it doesn't work? Indecision will absolutely paralyze an organization, right? Like fear, just paralysis, right? Or you get into analysis paralysis, right? There was a saying that you don't get fired for using VMware, right? Years ago. I don't know if any of you had ever heard that saying, but remember also before VMware came out, or right when VMware came out, people with who were looking at VMware were like, oh no, you are going to have to pry my physical servers out of my cold, dead hands. But then they realized that virtualization had a great deal of value. And now we're faced with the solution or this issue where you have 20 years with the tooling with VMware, and people are just really hanging on to it. And it's because they love it so much. It's because they're afraid that it's going to be hard to move to a new platform. Well, keep in mind, like we make things easy, we make that easy too. We give you tools to make this easy. When I say we give you tools, I mean we quite literally give you the tool that makes this easy. It's a tool that we call Move, right? Very clever name, Move. We used to call it Extract. And as a person who hates going to the dentist, extract just kind of gave me the willies a little bit. I'm glad they changed it to move. But we use move as a tool to move VMs from VMware over to AHV. Very easy. We've been working on this for a long time. This is not something that we just dreamt up about the time that Broadcom decided to buy VMware. It was way before that. We started really early on this. And so um, we continue to develop this tool. We continue to make it faster, better, easier, more efficient, more intuitive, right? And Nutanix Move, as I said, it has a very proud history. I was talking to a customer recently at a golf tournament and in Minneapolis, and the weather was beautiful. It wasn't like scorching hot like it is here in Texas. Anyway, customer was saying that they are using Move. They adopted AHV. They kind of started small. They kind of got their feet wet with it, realized that they liked it, put some workloads on it, and then when that next renewal came up, they decided to go, or before that next renewal for VMware came up, they decided to go all in on Nutanix. Right now, they migrate 1,000 VMs a week. 1,000. They have 70,000 VMs overall that they want to migrate to Nutanix. And they are currently doing 1,000 per week. They're convinced that they could do more than 1,000 per week, but they're limited on staff, and so they don't want to go too crazy. But that's just an example of how people are moving these workloads over to AHV. And the migration process is actually very easy. Sorry, my crazy Uncle Walter is trying to call me. I got a story about him, but I'm not gonna tell that story today. Everybody has a crazy Uncle Walter, right? Anyway, he calls you and he asks you questions about things because Google is not his friend. Anyway, so this migration process, like where does it start, right? You go through a wizard, right? We make it easy. We go through a wizard. You select a source, you select a target, you go through the wizard. It creates a run book for you. It creates a migration plan for you. It synchronizes all the data between the old stuff and the new stuff. And then when you're ready, you click a button called cutover, right? It's right there with a little purple dot on it. You click cutover and everything gets cut over. Everything you've put in that plan gets cut over. If it doesn't cut over correctly, you fail it back because all you really did was turn off the original, turn on the new one. So this is not a live migration. I just want to make that clear right now. Unless you're going from Nutanix to Nutanix, it's not a live migration. If you're going from three-tier VMware to Nutanix, it is not a live migration. But you hit cutover, and if it doesn't cut over correctly, or an individual VM doesn't cut over correctly, you can just fail it back. It's back up and running over here. All good. You figure out what went wrong, right? Modify whatever you need to modify and go for it again. So you just kind of ease into it, and then you can just like really start knocking them down. There is also the opportunity for those of you who run Nutanix on ESX now, you could do an in-place conversion. A lot of people are afraid to this. We've put tons and tons and tons of work into making sure that in-place conversions go smoothly. And there's an anonymous quote here. Um, it was me that made the quote. Just kidding. It wasn't me. But sometimes customers don't want to be identified because then everybody calls them and asks them lots of questions, right? So the migration portion, the move portion, very easy. But will your apps run on it? Right. So that's the next question people tend to ask. Will my apps run on this? And is it going to be performant? Is it going to be resilient? Right. Well, let's take a look. I talked to you about the fact that VDI was kind of our first big killer workload. And there's a reason for that, right? VDI as a workload, very, very demanding on your infrastructure, very demanding on servers, very demanding on storage, very demanding on networking, combining all together so that the desktops have local access to the storage. And guess what? You've unlocked that IO bottleneck, right? That was always the performance killer for VDI. It was the IO bottleneck. We got away from that, but But as time went on, we discovered that VDI started not adoption, but the preponderance of VDI as a workload throughout all of the Nutanix customers was all of a sudden, or over time, really, not all of a sudden, was overshadowed by mission critical workloads, right? People discovered that not only was Nutanix fast, but it was very, very resilient. So people started putting those mission critical workloads on Nutanix, and that's probably the majority of the workloads that we have out there right now. We refer to them as business critical. Okay. But AHV has this massive ecosystem. And I'm going to tell you that a lot of companies who kind of sat on, VMware and were like, yeah, we don't need to develop for anybody else. Now they're going, oh, hey, guess what? We need to get our virtual appliance ported over to Nutanix. We need to make sure that our application is compatible with AHV. And so you can see that that number is growing very rapidly. So over 1,200, over 1,100 solutions validated on AHV. I think 2 years ago, that number was like in the 700 range. So you can see how fast this has been going. Okay. But what about future workloads? Is Nutanix as a platform going to take me into the future as I introduce new workloads? Right. But when you say new workload, what are we really talking about here? We're talking about containers. VMs, in and of themselves, VMs will never go away, but the industry itself is very rapidly moving toward the use of containers. Containers will inevitably outpace VMs. And if any of you customers think that you're immune to adopting containers at some point, you are wrong. Most of you, I would say the vast majority of you, whether you know it or not, are leveraging containers in some form or fashion, right? Now, they could be containers hosted in a VM. Okay. So I'm not saying that you're going to throw away VMs, but ask yourself this question. Does your team have experience with containers? Do you have any platform engineers or DevOps people on the team? Do you plan to create yet another silo of IT and start drafting Kubernetes superstars who are in high demand and have their own agents and their own legal teams, like Mike Parsons? Will you have to cut other players from the team to afford them and or destroy the morale of the team by paying them ridiculous sums of money? Because we have examples of that going on, and it doesn't always work out, right? How about if you just have the same team who learns about containers and Nutanix makes it easy for them to learn about containers? Ah, there's the solution. No outlay of money, no robbing from other teams' players, right? Nobody likes that. Now, I've made it sound easy, didn't I? You don't have to do all of this, but you might be thinking that building and managing a cloud native platform is easy, right? It's got to be easy. You just download it, install Kubernetes, right? No. When we talk about Kubernetes, and we talk about containers, because we can almost kind of use those terms interchangeably because Kubernetes is the de facto platform for container orchestration. It's important to remember that Kubernetes, in and of itself, is only a small piece of the puzzle when you're building a cloud native platform that's capable of running applications at scale, securely in production, right? A full-fledged cloud native platform is made up of many layers, each with a specific role, kind of like a football team without all the drama, right? These layers handle everything from networking and storage to security and orchestration. And more importantly, each one of these layers needs to be thoroughly tested, validated, and maintained to ensure that the platform is reliable and scalable. Because if these players don't get along, the whole thing is broken, right? Now, a lot of you are DIY people. I'm a DIY person, right? My DIY um, um, forays usually deal with saving money, right? I have the option to buy yeah, $350 garage door opener because my old one is just quit one day, or I can buy $5 worth of capacitors and tear the control board out of it and solder new capacitors on and fix it for $8, right? That's my form of DIY. But if you're thinking this is easy, if you're thinking it can't be that hard, you must be a do-it-yourselfer. But like me, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. Jerry Jones is a do-it-yourselfer. He shouldn't be a do-it-yourselfer, right? Because he's got a whole team of coaches and stuff to do stuff for him. But there is difficulty around this large number of open source projects that combine to form a Kubernetes cloud native platform, right? Lots of bits and pieces. Do you want to be the one who weeds through the 1,200 offerings, right? It's not just about picking the tools. You got to test, validate, ensure all these tools integrate and work seamlessly together, as I mentioned. And that reminds me of a story that I heard, a football story. So Jerry Jones is trying to figure out just a couple months ago, during training camp, Jerry Jones, he's trying to figure out um, how to like get the most that he can out of Dak Prescott because that's an expensive guy. So this is what he does. He choppers from Oxnard over to Kansas City, takes limo up to St. Joseph, and he goes and talks to Andy Reid. He says, "Andy, buddy, right? Like, why is Patrick so good? Why is Mahomes such a good quarterback?" And Andy says, "Well, it's because Patrick is super super smart, right?" And Jerry's like, "Okay, yeah. What do you mean he's smart, right? Like he memorizes plays or something?" And he's like, "No, no, no. That's part of it." He goes, "Check it out." He goes, "Hey, Patrick, come over here." So Patrick comes over and he goes, "What's up, coach?" And he goes, "I got a question for you." And he asks Patrick, "Who is your father's brother's nephew?" And Patrick goes, "That'd be me, coach." He goes, "You're right." And he looks at Jerry and he says, "See, Jerry, Patrick, he's super smart." And Jerry's like, "Huh, okay." So jumps back in the limo, goes back down to the airport, flies back to Oxnard. He goes over. He's like, "Hey, Brian, come over here. Come over here, coach. I got a question for you." He's like, "Okay." And he goes, "Do you think Dak's smart?" And Brian says, "Yeah, of course Dak's smart." And he goes, "Okay, call him over here." So Brian calls over to Dak. He says, "Dak, come over here." And Dak comes over and he says, "What's up, coach?" He says, "Jerry's got a question for you." Says, "Okay." And Jerry goes, "Dak, who is your father's brother's nephew?" And Dak goes, "Well, that'd be me, Jerry." And Jerry goes, "No, dummy. It's Patrick Mahomes." Anyway, so that's more about Jerry, but I thought that was a funny thing that I heard recently. But you don't need a lot of drama. You don't need a lot of difficulty. You don't need a lot of super super smart people, right? You could do this in an effortless way with Nutanix, right? So hey, welcome to Effortless Cloud Native. Skip the struggles with the Nutanix Kubernetes platform, right? We put it all together for you. All that 1,200 stuff, you don't have to deal with that. We did it for you. Remember all of that complicated Nutanix or all that complicated stack stuff, right? Trying to figure out what products to use. Well, surprise, like I said, we did it for you. So this is an enterprise ready stack. We call it Nutanix Kubernetes Platform, NKP. It is a consistent way of deploying and managing Kubernetes clusters anywhere. We have this thing that we call an opinionated stack. And it's not that we just put a couple of engineers in a room and said, "Hey, develop a stack," and that'll be our opinionated stack. You got to understand that Nutanix bought a company called D2IQ over a year ago, and D2IQ came from Mesosphere, and Mesosphere was one of the companies, along with Google and some other open source companies, who developed Kubernetes in the first place, right? So we didn't hire some obscure folks to give us an opinion. We hired the people who kind of created the stack. So And we take care of all of this, by the way, all of these products, which you don't have to use them all. You can pick and choose which one of these you use, but we manage the life cycle of all of these things. And you can interchange them if you like. But remember, an opinionated stack. So bringing all of that Nutanix ease of administration to Kubernetes itself. Remember, we're the easy button. Now, you got to ask yourself, why would you want to run VMs and containers in completely separate environments with different storage, different management, right? You don't need all that. You don't need more silos in your life. NKP will run containers along with AHV and NCI on NCI on premises in your data center or at the edge along with your virtual machines, right? That includes persistent storage, data services, hybrid multi-cloud. Can you deploy this in AWS, GCP, Azure? Yes, all of them. And the beauty of it is that you manage it all from that single pane of glass that I told you about that really works until you throw a baseball through it. No, I'm just kidding. Um, So why would you want to use NKP? Well, just because I explained it all to you, but to sort of narrow it down, freedom of choice, one unified platform, the power of open. And when I say the power of open, this is a very, very important differentiator as it relates to Nutanix. We use only upstream Kubernetes open source products. And what does that mean? Or projects? What does that mean? That means that when you develop applications on Nutanix Kubernetes Platform, you are not locked into Nutanix Kubernetes Platform. But guess what? If you develop applications in EKS, AKS, Red Hat, Rancher, you're locked in to those development platforms. You don't want that. You don't want to be locked in. We're tired of lock-in. We want openness, right? We want a unified platform. We want data-centric deployments where we put apps where they belong and data where it belongs. Okay. Now, in case you're wondering if Nutanix has any street cred, I told you that we have street cred, right? We bought D2IQ, we incorporated it, we integrated it, right? And Forrester and Gartner actually put us in a very good place. So we're emerging. I don't have the Gartner slide in here because it like just came out and I didn't capture an image of it anyway. Um, Here's Nutanix under Forrester Wave multi-cloud container platforms. There we are, right there in the same quadrant as Red Hat and SUSE. Um, Marantis moved down, by the way. We moved up and we're in the emerging quadrant. I think it's the upper left-hand quadrant of the Gartner one for container orchestration. Now, you're convinced now that Nutanix is a good solution for containers. I'm sure of that. But what are you going to do with containers? Where are you going to start using containers? Well, you can start here with AI. Do you realize that AI is a container-based workload? Um, it needs a bunch of other stuff too besides containers. But you need people skills. But it can be the same people that are doing the Kubernetes stuff. Containers need access to GPUs, all that good stuff. Now, not every LLM needs access to a GPU, but you can think of containers or you can think of AI simply as software that runs in containers, right? And you want to be able to deploy that in your organization. Well, at least 50% of you do, right? Now, why are we talking about this? Because Bain said that half of you are interested in AI, and about an eighth of you are already at it. Adoption is expected to surge up to 89%, according to ChatGPT, except in Texas. Texas is only in about the 16% interest range for AI, but I think we can bump that up a bit. Maybe we can double that. Maybe we can double the interest in AI in Texas to 32%, which is about what the experts say our chances here in Dallas are of making it to the playoffs. 32%. And maybe we'll use AI to give us a better chance, right? But AI also requires um, an LLM, right? If you want to use LLM, you got to pick a model, not a runway model, but a language learning model. And there are a lot to choose from. You may even need or use multiple models at once, not in the same sense as Odell Beckham Jr. or Ron Gronkowski. We're not talking about those kinds of models, but rather in the sense that LLMs can be developed for specialized purposes or specialized types of inferencing. And new ones are being developed at a very rapid pace daily, right? There's a bunch of them out there. So, how do you decide which ones to use? Well, as you could imagine, Nutanix helps you figure this out. Nutanix helps you put all of it together, right? So we have this thing called Nutanix Enterprise AI. It's all about creating the right platform that's simple to operate, flexible, and adaptable for any use case that leverages AI. Enterprise AI starts with cloud-like infrastructure, that's us, with resilient, secure, and simple day two operations. Um, for an AI platform, you must have a critical component, which is storage, AI ready storage. We have that built in. It's called Nutanix Unified Storage. We already talked about the fact that AI as a workload that runs in containers, right? Another critical piece is databases. Guess what? Nutanix has a database platform. It's called NDB, right? You see how all the pieces start to kind of fit together for containers and for this net new modern workload that we call AI, right? We can keep this going. Inferencing, vector databases, retrieval augmented generation, right? Making AI better and more relative to the data that we provide. We can run this in dark sites, right? So you don't have to be connected to the internet to run this stuff. And we package the whole NAI thing up together in what we call GPT in a box, right? So that GPT in a box is more of a SKU than a product, if you will. But there's a lot of differentiators that Nutanix brings to this model, right? So we give you all the bits and pieces that you need to do a turnkey AI stack, including container orchestration, including storage, including the ability, a UI, not a bunch of command line stuff, but a UI that allows you to go get the model that you want, download it, install it, manage it, monitor it, know what it's doing, scale it. Okay. All of that good stuff comes in a turnkey solution. Now, does that mean you need the entire turnkey solution? Do you need GPT in a box? No, because if you already have a container platform that you're happy with, we can deploy Nutanix Enterprise AI on that. If you're in public cloud and you leverage public cloud platform already, we can deploy NAI on that just as its own piece. But so what is NAI? It's the solution that allows you to go get the model, download the model, deploy the model, create the keys, and manage the models that you have. You got to have models. Again, not supermodels, not glamour models. You're not going to try to hire Giselle because Tom Brady will get mad at you, or maybe he won't get mad at you anymore. Anyway, not that kind of model, but the model that does inferencing and answers smart questions, right? You know any models that answer smart questions? Well, I do. There's a bunch of them on the internet, and they're free. Actually, not all of them are free. The internet-based ones are not free. They've got this token model. We won't get into that, but the last thing I want to talk about to you or talk about with you today, we talked about adoption, we talked about customers. I want to really narrow in on this little guy down here at the bottom. Maybe you've heard me talk about that before. Net Promoter Score of 90 on a 10-year average, right? If you're trying to de-risk your investment in a thing, if you're trying to find a little whoopee to wrap around yourself that makes you feel good and protected and comfortable, the 90 NPS score has to be just that. What that means is that when you have trouble and you call into Nutanix for support, you will get support. And our customers give us an A and have been giving us an A on support for 10 years. That I just I see this number and I'm like, how is that? How do we do that? The way we do it is we are myopically focused on your success. Now, if you're thinking about Nutanix some more, we can get into some other things. Test drive. We've got a couple of websites here. You can just Google for a Nutanix test drive. You can Google for VMware alternatives. We've got a lot of material out there that you can read and go through. I talked about a little bit of it today. But what are some next steps you might have? Well, I'm going to turn over to my friend Benjamin Krill. And I'm going to give you a prediction. I'm going to give you a prediction, playoff prediction. No, not prediction, record prediction for Dallas. Right here we go. I predict that Dallas is going 11-5 this year. 11 arrests, but only 5 convictions. Thank you very much, Krill. Back to you, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dennis. So yeah, so I mean, Dennis gave us a lot of great information. So you may be thinking, all right, that's fantastic. Where do I get started? So let us help you out. So one of the things that we do is we do monthly office hours. So if you're looking to learn more, or maybe you just want to help celebrate my birthday because it happens to be next Wednesday, come join us for the monthly office hours. So we'll talk about things around like, hey, how do I get started on a Nutanix journey? But I'm mostly cloud. Dennis mentioned some of the solutions can run on your cloud native, or I've already started doing some container stuff, so I think I'm too far down the road for using the Nutanix solution. Not true. We could talk about how we can manage your existing as well as help you expand it. So come to those office hours. We'll typically have a little bit of content at the front end to kind of start the conversation, but then after that, it's open. Any question you have related to Nutanix, happy to have those conversations with you. If you want to get hands-on with it, Dennis and I will be co-hosting a hands-on lab boot camp around NKP. So obviously NKP, if you're traditionally in the data center infrastructure, it's a little bit new to you. So let's help you get started on that journey, get your hands on with it, get some experience with it, so it doesn't seem so new and potentially having a little bit of that fear of the unknown. Will help get you moving along that learning curve. And as we talked about, we have migration jump starts to help you get moving along. If you need just a little bit of a kickstart, let us help you out with that journey. We'll set up the move appliance. We'll walk you through a couple of those migrations. And the nice thing is that tool is available to you ongoing. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a, hey, I'm migrating off of VMware. If you've got some workloads that are out in Azure, we maybe need to bring it back, or maybe we need to take it out to Azure. You can continue to use that, and we can walk through all those different scenarios. So we've got jumpstart services for that. Let us help you out. Those are on our website, and I'm happy to provide some more information around that. So appreciate everybody's time today. Ellie, is there anything else that you have from a wrap-up perspective?
Nope, good here. Just take the survey. It'll be in the browser when we conclude.
Fantastic. Thank you everybody for your time. Answer all those survey questions and don't fumble it like my Bears are going to do this season.
Bye, all.
That's